A very good morning to all the students of Euro School Airoli. I would like to begin by bringing forth the idea of what is a nation. In order to understand what makes a nation, we first need to define it. You can't define what is a nation unless you can distinguish it from what is a country. A country is a geographical concept, whereas nation is identity. We've already analyzed how India began to identify itself as an identity with the revolt of 1857. It has been put forth by experienced historians that if 50% of a population identifies with an idea, it is the beginning of nationhood. Practically, the whole of northern India had come to realize that the British were here to exploit them. They were better off without the British. All of them identified with this concept of exploitation. That was the beginning of Indian nationhood. When does a land become a nation? Like I said, a nation can be described as a geographical land or a group of people having common identity. Now, this common identity can be in a form of language, religion, culture, goals, struggle, and many other factors. In modern terminology, a nation is a geographical area where people feel as one, a unity binding them. And this unity which bound the Indian people together was when the British colonized India. Before that, India was just a land of many kingdoms and principalities sharing common culture and religion. But they never considered themselves as one people. In order to become a nation from a country, people should consider themselves as a whole with an identity even transcending geography. However, due to various factors, there was a growth of nationalism which eventually led to the growth of Indian national movement which gave India its independence. We will now study what are the factors which led to the growth of this nationalism. Building a nation is no easy task, and the feeling of nationalism takes time to grow. Various factors come to play which causes a growth in nationalism amongst its people. Some of the factors which led to the rise of Indian nationalism are political and administrative unity, English language and Western education, development of transport and means of communication, modern press and the rise of vernacular literature, economic exploitation, revival of Indian heritage, impact of international events, social and religious reform movements, repressive policies, and the emergence of the middle class. We've already looked at how pre-British India was divided into several feudal kingdoms fighting with each other. There was the Sikhs, the Marathas, even among the Marathas there were many kingdoms, the Holkars, the Scindias, the Bhosles. We had the Mughal Empire. So time and again India was subjected to aggression and numerous people came and consolidated their rule. The British Raj for the first time brought India into a centralized government. They brought a uniform state structure with uniform laws applied to everyone. The civil servants were instrumental in enforcing these laws, and the Indians for the first time were governed under a unified regime. This ultimately then led to the growing of national consciousness due to the fact that everybody was under a single system. For the first time, the people came together as one entity. There was a common currency system, there was a common set of rules and regulations, there was a common laws and judicial system, which again brought more cohesiveness amongst the people. A centralized state brings people together politically as the people's political identity, which ultimately led to their different identities being merged into one. I would now like to take you back to the 1600s. Why did the British come to India? The entire British policy of imperialism was governed by the three G's: God, glory, and gold. One of the prime reasons why the British were interested in expanding their political suzerainty in India was spread of Christianity. They were a handful, and India at that time comprised of today's modern day Pakistan, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Ceylon, that is Sri Lanka, Nepal, and much, much more. How were these handful amount of people going to control the millions? They needed a system in place. So they set up formal schools and colleges. Modern education was spread and promoted by the British in order to spread Christianity amongst the masses. Because this also served their interest, because they needed Indians to fill into the administrative posts. How would they run a huge country like India? How many people would they get from London? Now, this was a double edged sword. They did this primarily for themselves, but however, it also benefited the Indians. Because through Western education, Indians became familiarized with the idea of democracy, equality, liberty, and justice. People began to interpret and understand, think, introspect. If democracy was good enough for England, why they were imperialistic in India? If they practice equality and liberty and justice in their own land, why different rules for Indians in India? India, being a very peaceful nation, even till date, holds the record of being the land which has never attacked any other land, accepted the British with open arms, just like they accepted the Alexander the Great, or the Mughals, or the Tughlaqs, or Sher Shah Suri. But this new education system set their process rolling. Our education system was also biased. It was limited only to a defined section of the population. We followed the Varna system. So only the Brahmins had access to this education. However, the British did not believe in the caste system of India. Their aim and objective was only to develop low ranking administrative posts so that the administrative work could be done. Now, this in turn meant that irrespective of your caste and creed, anybody could become a part of this education system. And their education system then became a channel for Indians to understand modern scientific ideas. English educated Indians like Rajaram Mohan Roy, Swami Vivekanand, Dadabhai Naoroji, Surendranath Banerjee were some of the people who realized the hypocrisy which prevailed in the Indian caste system. They began to think, they began to introspect how we could change it. English thus then became a medium through which Indian educated could communicate with each other. India, as we know, is a land where you have multilingual and multi-religious culture. People from different provinces speak the same dialect in different ways. But for the first time, they got a language through which they communicated with each other. They now could share their ideas and mobilize and develop a country into a nation. A few glimpses of our social reformers. Geographically, today India is the seventh largest country in the world. Imagine in 1600s. I think it would have been third or fourth. The British needed to develop transport and modern communication so that they could communicate with different parts of India. This was not done for the benefit of the Indians, but which was done to suit their own interest. Using the technological advancement in their own land, they developed railway, postal, telegraph services for better commercial, political, military, and economic interest of themselves. However, this also stimulated the growth of Indian nationalism by helping the Indians communicate and organize better. This eventually also led to the development of political organizations like Indian National Congress, All India Kisan Sabha, the Youth League, and many such organizations. Railways made it possible for people of different towns, cities, districts, provinces to meet, exchange views, organize movements across the country. A glimpse of one of the first railway lines initiated by the British. Modern press and vernacular literature. Now, press in general facilitates the exchange of messages, thoughts, ideas, and opinions on a large scale at a shorter period of time. Who more than us are experiencing that today? We are all at home, but the news of the spread of the coronavirus is reaching us at our homes. Similarly, the press played a very important role in developing India from a country into a nation. The printing press, which was the gift of the Renaissance, was revolutionized, and it led to the ideas being communicated to thousands of people at the same time. The development of the press had a double-edged sword effect. One, from the point of view of spread of English, the press also encouraged the vernacular medium of expression, as a result of which people who had no access to English as a medium of instruction, because India is a vast country, the British developed English as a means only in the metropolitan towns and cities. The vernacular literature and the press now translated these modern ideas of democracy, nationalism, liberty, and equality, which further fueled the fire of the nationalist movement. Amrit Bazar Patrika, the Bengali, the Bombay Chronicle, the Tribune, the Pioneer, the Kesari, the Marathas, is some of the newspapers which played a major role in exposing the British and spreading awareness among the people. Banking Chandra's Chattopadhyay's Anand Math, which had Vande Mataram as one of the best known nationalistic novels which influenced freedom fighters. Thus, modern press and vernacular literature played a very, very important role in fueling the fire of nationalism in India. Economic exploitation was one of the worst features of the British Raj. Now, prior to the British, it's not that India was not ruled by multiple kingdoms. From time immemorial, India has encompassed and allowed different cultures, different emperors to make India their stronghold. But at every point of time, whether it was the Mughals, whether it was the Tughlaqs, they had a sympathetic approach to the Indian people. They amalgamated into the Indian culture. They looked after Indians as their subjects. Yes, there is an exception or two, whether it was Aurangzeb, but mostly the Indians were looked after. Hence, when the British came in, it was not new. We thought that the British would also become a part of our culture and look after us, as the others did. But this was far from the truth. The British were only using India as a means of suppliers of cheap raw material, which they sold it back to us in form of high prices. So what they did was, they took cheap raw materials such as cotton from India, took it to their mills in Lancashire and Manchester, converted it into finished goods and sold it back to us. So India was only the point of a source of raw material as well as a market for British goods. They benefited at both the levels. They bought the raw material at cheap prices and they sold the finished goods also at a profit. While the heavy duty was imposed on Indian goods, it's not that there was not a market for Indian goods. The Indian embroidery, the Indian art and artifacts, handicrafts were a huge demand in the international market. But the British imposed such high duties on the Indian products that it became completely impossible for the artisans to have any kind of sale in the international market. Now, a cotton cloth or sari made of cotton will not going to last forever, whereas a polyester sari has a longer longevity. The poverty of India forced the people to shift their preferences from indigenous products to factory made, more durable products made by the British. It was not that the people did not want to patronize the indigenous industries. It was nothing but the poor choosing the cheaper and the more durable option. This slowly and slowly ate into the Indian handicraft and artisans and the craftsmen. So much so, thousands of people were led to become surviving on mere 2 square meals a day. British drew their strength from the fact that India was a large geographical country. They drew their strength from the fact that we were multilingual, multi-religious. They had realized that it was a culture, a civilization which was much, much superior to them. So the only way they were going to have a stronghold on this most ancient civilization was to drive before the people what was negative about this culture. Now we've already studied how towards in the later Vedic period, the caste system, which was very positive, the base of the caste system was the barter system, which then degenerated into the rigid caste system. The British drew inspiration from that. They put forth before us all those customs and traditions which were negative. It's not that the British at some point of time did not practice caste system. Having studied the feudal ages in grade 8, we very well know the kind of disparity between the haves and have-nots which prevailed in Europe. We know how they had even remnants of the Parda system in London. So it's not that the British civilization was progressive right from the beginning. They had learned. There were elements in our civilization too which needed correction. So the British drew their strength from this feeling of inferiority complex which Indians had developed over years of subjugation and exploitation. How come everybody wants to control us? Are we not good enough? Are we not worth a civilization which can uphold its dignity? The Western educated Indians as well as the British, who had a sympathetic attitude, who looked upon Indian culture with reverence, tried to revive this glorious Indian past heritage. Some of them were Max Miller, William Jones, Charles Wilkins. Many Sanskrit texts were translated into English, and it showed the supremacy and the glory of our Indian culture and heritage. Many Indian scholars like R.C. Bhandarkar, H.P. Shastri also helped in reviving the past glory of India. Again, these factors help in regenerating a sense of confidence, pride, and patriotism amongst the Indians. There were several international events which helped in the awakening and national consciousness in India. Having acquired access to Western education, books, communication regarding the American Declaration of Independence, the French Revolution, the unification of Italy and Germany, the defeat of Russia by a small country like Japan, were some of the movements which inspired the Indians. If they could do it, why couldn't we? They realized that the British practiced double standards in their own backyard and double standards in the weak nations of Asia and Africa. The Indian gained confidence that they will be able to defeat the British and develop more self-determination. These international events promoted the rise of nationalism. Because of the Western education, there was a realization amongst the intelligentsia as well as the social reformers that India needs to free itself from the shackles of orthodoxy, regressive social and religious practices, customs, and habits, which were an obstacle to the national advancement and human dignity. Realizing that the British were using these outdated customs and traditions in order to lower the confidence of the Indians, they started movements against them. They wanted Indians to get rid of the caste system, untouchability, gender discrimination, social evils, and many other aggressive practices. The social reformers were of the opinion that they wanted a nation where Indians were equal, irrespective of caste, religion, and creed. Many social reformers like Rajaram Mohan Roy, Jyotirao Phule, Swami Vivekanand led by example. Most of them belonged to the upper castes. They initiated reforms in their own homes in order to inspire the others, which in turn helped develop national consciousness by spreading modern values amongst the Indians. Aggressive policies and racial arrogance of the British. The British were very racist and arrogant towards the Indians, and this attitude was revealed when they did not allow high qualified Indians to serve in high administrative ranks. They just wanted Indians to be the low cadre clerks. The age limit of the Indian civil service examination was reduced from 21 to 19 in order to debar the Indians from entering the civil services. There were also a lot of repressive measures which were passed by the British in order to subjugate the Indians. One amongst them was the Arms Act, which prevented the Indians from owning arms without license. The British realized that the vernacular press was playing a very important role in bringing the whole nation together. Hence, they passed the Vernacular Press Act, which imposed unrealistic restrictions on the Indian press. During the viceroyship of Lord Ripon, Indian judges could try Europeans, but the British opposed it and ultimately succeeded in getting the law amended in their interest. This was the General Enlistment Act, which was passed again in the interest of the British and against the Indians. Actions like these exposed the racial attitudes of the British and the discriminatory nature of the British Raj. Lord Curzon implemented even more racial policies and partitioned Bengal in order to curb Indian nationalism. This further created resentment amongst the masses. This then led to the emergence of the Swadeshi movement, which had the boycott of British goods and the development of Indian indigenous industries. These repressive policies and racial arrogance of the British further fueled the fire and strengthened the Indian national movement. Years, due to Western education, development of transport and communication, they developed a conscious Indian middle class. Initially, the Indian intelligentsia thought that since India was under the rule of the most advanced country, it would progress and India would also thrive. However, the British had no such intention. They drained India economically, and the middle class realized that their interest cannot be protected under the British rule. The Indian middle class included traders, business communities, money lenders, landlords, educated Indians employed in low-rank administrative positions. They realized that the British rule is not beneficial for Indians. They then played a very important role in developing national consciousness of the people. This found expression in the foundation of the Indian National Congress, which then became a platform for the national movement of India.